A broken papyrus in Dublin preserves one of mythology's strangest throne disputes. Horus and Seth took kingship to court. Before the falcon god could rule Egypt, the gods had to decide whether inheritance, strength, age, or restored order made a king legitimate. Which is a strange problem, because most versions make this sound simple. This is the story of the contendings of Horus and Seth, and how Egypt imagined kingship as a verdict, not just a victory. This is mythology. And our question is narrow but dangerous. What makes a god legitimate enough to become king? The version many of us inherit is clean. Horus is the good son of Osiris. Seth is the violent uncle who murders Osiris and contests the throne. So Horus fights. Horus wins, and order returns. I believed that outline for years because it feels like the story wants to be read that way. Egyptian art often links Horus with kingship, protection, and rightful rule. Seth, in the Osiris cycle, is murder, disruption, and a force that tears the family apart. So the simplified version is not foolish. It is built from real pieces of the tradition. But Papyrus Chester Beatty I preserves something much less tidy. It does not rush from crime to coronation. It lingers in speeches, delays, humiliations, tricks, bodily injury, and arbitration. The surviving manuscript belongs to a much later New Kingdom setting, not the beginning of Egyptian kingship itself. That distinction matters because the papyrus is not a stenographer's record of the gods. It is a literary object that lets us see how Egyptians could think with myth. And in this story, Horus does not simply defeat Seth. He has to be recognized. The crisis begins with absence. Osiris is dead, and the throne he embodied cannot remain empty forever. Horus brings the strongest claim a royal heir can bring. He is the son. His argument is not only revenge, it is continuity. If kingship passes from father to son, then Horus repairs the break Seth created. This is why Horus's claim carries more than family emotion. A throne is not only a chair, it is a public statement that the world still has shape. That idea goes deep into Egyptian royal symbolism. The king's name could appear under Horus's protection, so Horus' kingship was not a casual title. It was a way to say that the ruler stood inside an ordered pattern. So when Horus asks for the throne, the myth is not just solving a family murder. It is testing whether inheritance can hold Egypt together after violence has broken the line. But Seth has a claim too, and the story takes it seriously enough to slow down. He is the elder relative, immensely strong, and associated with power at the margins. He is dangerous, but not meaningless. In wider Egyptian tradition, Seth can be hostile and necessary at the same time. That is the first crack in the simple story. If Seth were only a flat villain, there would be no need for a trial. The divine assembly, often framed through the language of the Ennead, becomes the mechanism that makes this myth political. The gods do not just watch two powers collide, they ask what kind of power deserves public recognition. And that turns the contendings of Horus and Seth into something closer to a royal succession case. When I started looking at the story through the papyrus, the fights became less like action scenes. They became tests. Each episode asks the same question from a different angle. Can Horus inherit if Seth can overpower him? Can Seth rule if his strength produces disorder? Can the gods crown a young heir before the court is satisfied? The papyrus makes those questions almost procedural. It moves through argument, interruption, contest, complaint, and renewed hearing. That rhythm matters because delay itself becomes proof. A rushed coronation would only confirm that Horus had supporters. A delayed judgment can claim something larger. This is where Ra's resistance, or hesitation to endorse Horus immediately becomes the dramatic break. If the gods already favored Horus, the story could end quickly. But Ra resists an easy verdict. That resistance keeps Seth's claim alive. It also forces Horus's kingship to become more than bloodline. Here, the myth does something very Egyptian in its political imagination. It does not deny chaos exists. It asks where chaos belongs. The legal shape of the story is important. A trial does not remove conflict. It gives conflict a place to speak without letting it become the whole world. That is why Isis matters in the story's machinery too. She does not simply grieve Osiris or protect Horus from the margins. She intervenes because the heir's claim still needs pressure, persuasion, and strategy. The court is divine, but it behaves like politics. Claims must be argued. Alliances matter. Delay changes the weight of a verdict. And public recognition turns a private injury into a matter of order. That is why Seth's continued presence matters. The trial can crown Horus, but it cannot delete the power Seth represents. So the delayed question becomes unavoidable. If Seth loses, why does the tradition keep him close to the structure of order? The answer begins with the body. The wedge-at eye is often treated today like a decorative symbol, but in the mythic field around Horus, the eye is not just decoration. It is a wound that becomes repair. In Egyptian amuletic tradition, the wedge-at carried meanings of protection, regeneration, and wholeness. That is crucial because the Contendings does not leave Horus untouched. In the Chester Beatty story, Horus's eyes are injured and healed during the struggle. The wider Egyptian symbolism of the wedge-at helps later audiences see why that wound could matter. A king cannot easily claim order while damage remains unrepaired. Order has to be restored in a form everyone can recognize. This is why the eye works so well as an image beside the myth. It is not abstract theology floating above the story. It is a damaged part of Horus that can be shown, repaired, and returned. The amulet tradition helps explain why this image could carry so much weight. An amulet is small enough to wear, but powerful enough to make an idea portable. Protection becomes something the body can carry. Regeneration becomes something the eye can show. And wholeness becomes something kingship can claim. At first, it looks like personal injury. Then it becomes an image of brokenness made whole. Finally, in the wider symbolic world of Egypt, it becomes a sign fit for kingship, offering, and protection. This is the second reveal. The story is not asking whether Horus can avoid injury. It asks whether injury can be restored into public order. And once you see that, the trial stops feeling like a delay. It becomes the point. By the end, the evidence points in one direction. Horus brings inheritance from Osiris. Seth brings force, elder status within the divine family, and the claim that his dangerous power is useful to the cosmos. Ra's resistance, or hesitation to endorse Horus immediately, gives the dispute weight. Isis's interventions show that rightful succession still needs advocacy. The divine assembly turns both claims into a public judgment. And in the Chester Beatty version, the final pressure toward Horus's kingship also comes through Osiris. From the realm of the dead, Osiris reminds the gods that his power still matters, and that refusing justice has consequences. The wounded and restored eye gives later audiences a powerful image for what the verdict means. Damaged order made whole. The throne is not seized, it is judged back into order. That is the core of Horus' kingship in this version of the myth. He does not win because the story forgot Seth's strength. He wins because strength alone cannot heal the succession crisis. Seth's claim matters because it makes the verdict harder. Ra's resistance matters because easy legitimacy would prove too little. Osiris's intervention matters because the dead king is not silent in the question of succession. The wounded and restored Eye matters because it gives the mythic imagination a visible language for repair. So Horus's victory is not just the end of a feud. It is the conversion of injury, inheritance, and judgment into legitimate rule. And now we can return to the question the story leaves behind. If Seth is defeated, why does Egyptian myth keep needing him? Because order is not the same thing as the absence of force. Order is force placed under judgment. That is why this myth feels more sophisticated than a simple heroic fight. It knows that a kingdom needs inheritance, but blood alone can be fragile. It knows that a kingdom needs strength, but strength alone becomes terror. It knows that judgment matters because power has to be made public, witnessed, and accepted. And it knows that restoration matters because a broken world cannot simply be declared whole. So we end where we began, with Papyrus Chester Beatty I. A damaged object preserves a story about damaged order. And on that papyrus, kingship is not a prize for the strongest god. It is a verdict about restored order. Read politically. This Chester Beatty papyrus suggests that kingship must be made intelligible before the divine community as rightful order, not merely imposed by force. This raises a harder question. When a myth crowns the rightful king, what does it do with the force it cannot erase? We follow the old stories through their artifacts, symbols, and power structures until the myth starts acting like evidence. Which claim should matter most in a mythic succession trial? Blood inheritance, proven strength, or the power to restore order? See you next time.